Tobi is the founder and CEO of Shopify. It's a public company with over 10,000 employees. Today, I want to uncover what Tobi has learned building and operating a large tech company. Tobi is passionate about founder-led companies. He believes that they're able to focus more and take more risks. That's because they don't need to engage in all of the things that professionally managed companies do. This allows them to be more innovative, whereas professionally managed companies tend to revert to the mean.
Founder-led company doesn't need this, right? Because there's another thing of legitimacy, which is the founder. And I'm not saying this is a person. It's actually the fact that the founder is in the company is the thing. I think legitimacy is one of the most underappreciated resources that exist. I think that the only really good piece of writing I've found, and you probably might know 10 others, is Vitalik's. Vitalik wrote an essay on the topic of legitimacy, more like in the blockchain world, but I think it rings true across. And so where does this come from? In every company, there's a sort of founding story. Everyone sort of gets this clear sense that, hey, the reason why we have this job, the reason why we're on this mission, the reason why we're doing this thing is because at some point someone took the first step, right? Like they wrote the first line of code. That story is imbued in the company. It's in onboarding. It's even if no one would actively talk about it, it's something people eventually encounter. What happens when a story is told is that there is some sense, little bit of legitimacy almost deposited into a bank account. That's you can almost think about it as social credit of some kind. This happens in all companies, but if the founders are still there, they can still draw on this account of legitimacy. And so my role, I see very often, is that I have the pretty humbling ability to use the resources deposited into this bank account of legitimacy. In the company, you make changes. And because I can speak for the entire story of the place. Now, if I would leave Shopify, this bank account would only increase, but no one could draw on it, and therefore it can't be an active ingredient in the company. Okay, what does all this mean? The best thing founders can do is subtraction. This is surprising, but it's the reason. It's much easier to add things than it is to remove things. Adding things is a lot more expensive than removing things, actually. However, it requires some measure of bravery and risk taking anyway. Saying yes to a thing is actually if you say no to a thing, you say no to one thing. If you say yes to a thing, you actually say no to every other thing you could have done with this period of time. And so, as people are adding things, the set of things that can be done becomes smaller and smaller and smaller, and the set of things that has to be maintained gets larger and larger and larger, and you end up with more and more people actually working on just maintaining of the status quo or maintaining code bases and so on. So where does subtraction come in? Very often some things built, every individual addition was a very good idea, but where it builds to is actually sediment layers of something that actually doesn't make sense in the end, and that you have to walk away from. Sometimes you're building, for really, really good reasons, a product that actually will not make a difference for the company. Or when reality changes, you actually have, like I just said earlier, I had to subtract 60% of everything the entire R&D team was working on, which the reason why I could do this is because I could draw on the legitimacy of hey, I have seen every single version of this company. I've seen recessions, I have seen downturns, I've seen chaotic times, and I've seen calm times. I know what to do.
Tobi doesn't think there's any point doing what everyone else is doing. This results in a reversion to the mean. Companies need to be bold and take risks and follow their own path. And this leads to alpha, either positive or negative. And this has great value to consumers because it creates innovation and new products.
But there's exactly one thing that doesn't take risk, which is do the same thing everyone else does. The number one thing that is very, very hard to teach, actually, or very hard to convince people of, but I'm pretty sure is true, is that I just don't see value in doing the same thing as everyone else does. I don't know who grows up to say, I'm going to join industry, like I'm going to go into finance. And then, oh, well, it's not the best example. I'm going to go into, let's UX. Let's go to design UX. And then I'm going to do work that corresponds to sort of what generally everyone else launches around me, right? Like, I see where you might want to, because it gives you more common ground with your peers in other places. It gives you, it's easier to appreciate sort of making a slightly different version of something else that someone does, because then if you encounter those people who are behind that, you can now have a conversation about the sort of slight changes you made. But I think that's just, that if everyone does this, that makes this planet simply spin too slowly. I think sometimes there's significant wisdom encoded in what everyone's doing. In most cases, go all in on it. But in many cases, just put everything you've ever learned together to make something that's just as good as possible, right? Like, because otherwise, I think you're holding yourself back. And I think the company needs to de-risk this for people. Now, it's not no one's intuition. Every single time you do anything that is different from best practices, like there's so many euphemisms for just basically doing undifferentiated work. It's a strong statement I'm making here, but best practices actually just simply means don't take risk and do with what everyone else is saying you should be doing. Best practices are not that good. Like they should be best. No, they're average risk adjustment. Yeah, exactly. It's just average. And I don't think I have no time for average. I don't think our shit is that good around planet Earth. I think we can do much better on everything. There's no chance that in 100 years people are looking back and saying, "Wow, back then we just nailed everything." Like, it just doesn't. It's not gonna, like, we barely nailed any. Like, I mean, go back 3 years and we're like, "Wow, we just kind of had no idea how to do all these things," right? Like, it's so or like our video conferencing software was terrible. And like I mean, no one had a home setup, home desk, and so on and so on. So everything depends on innovation. The innovation depends on a very basic thing, which is like, to be innovative, you have to do things that are different. And if you do something different, you can either overperform or underperform status quo and RBS.
In order to be different, ideas are important. Tobi values ideas from everyone, and that means Shopify is not run in a top-down fashion. Shopify has a system called GSD for collecting ideas and pushing the good ones through to the implementation phase.
From this, we learned we need to have a really good mechanism by which we get the best of what we have. Shopify is very bottoms up. People can write proposals for every opportunity they see. That goes into a system which is called GSD, which stands for Get Shit Done. Then there's these phases. There's proposal phase, a prototyping phase, a build phase, and a releasing phase. And this system allows everyone in a company to just see everything that's going on. It's an entire plan. Once a year, we write product themes for a company, things that we cause to make true over the year. And then they sort of decompose into different projects. Then as this proposal is submitted for transition to the build phase or the prototyping phase. And then we can have great conversations about, is this a not yet? Is this a hell yes? Where does this go in a priority stack? And I think building this out has been incredibly clarifying and very, very good for the company. So a lot of the work, I think, of the last 2 years has been to get companies just really, really, really aligned on their missions.
To understand how this approach works at Shopify, you must also understand that Tobi doesn't believe in long-term planning. At every point in time, you should be able to rerun the function in your mind, which takes all of your current knowledge and decides what is the best thing to work on. In practice, that means whenever a team finishes their current project or task, they should reevaluate what the next highest priority thing is.
So you can run this constant, given what's going on right now, what's the best thing we can do? And you run this over and over and over like this. I actually think even concepts like roadmaps and just generally plans are actually overrated. I think the best possible roadmap is have a very clear eyed view of what matters to your merchant, have a super strong model of your own capabilities as a company, and then rerun the function of like deciding what is the very best thing you can work on. Every moment you have teams ready to pick the next task, instead of everyone sort of doggedly working off a thing that of course gets interrupted by reality.
Tobi's aversion to long-term planning fits into a wider view that Tobi has about the sunk cost fallacy. You must always reevaluate your decisions based on your latest knowledge.
A sunk cost fallacy is another thing. I mean, it is a real logical fallacy, like people over the fact that you have been doing something for a while means you want to keep going, because if you change your mind now, then you're basically passing judgment on all your prior decisions. So again, if you're on a path of wanting to be right in the context of others, logical consistency is your primary optimization target. Like, you want to have made a choice about something, and you want to stick with this choice because your identity is wrapped around your beliefs, your shared beliefs. Again, because you're prioritizing what other people think. One of a sort of, it's maybe too strong a term, but like I can't help but like think that if that's your operating modus, you're actually outsourcing your self-worth to the people around you, because you require positive affirmation by them to know that you're doing a good job, which I find is like really regrettable, because that actually gives too much power to people around you, first of all. And second, they don't want that job. They have their own thing going, right? Like they're not interested in moonlighting as your value system. And so but if you're in this worldview, sunk cost fallacy is something that is very, very important to you, and you engage with it a lot. And if you see people that seemingly have no problem with it, you will talk about them being good at not falling for a sunk cost fallacy. But again, this is the language of the predominant operating system of the world. If you're interested in truth, it doesn't exist a sunk cost fallacy, because it's irrelevant. It's an input into your decision making process that you have been doing a certain thing, but you already knew this because you were doing whatever was best given your entire mental model. You're trying to avoid continuation of previous ideas. What you want is every step, like every moment of your life, you ideally want to run a function over the entire search space of your mental model to decide what is the best possible next move for me. How should I spend the next minute? If new information comes in that is not dangerous to your identity, this is delightful. This is what your curiosity steers you towards. And if that piece of information invalidates any of prior beliefs, you might completely change. Obviously, you need to go do the exact opposite of what you've been doing until this point. This is not changing your mind, because your mind is consistent. Your mind is executing a function over the search space every step of the way. It's the variables that change, and that's like, there's no moral problem with it. But it's true. So when people observe, by the way, I'm aspiring to all these kind of things. I'm not like, no one's perfect at this. It's something you can only aspire to in general, because again, our firmware works against us. I mean, there's other sentences like strong opinions weakly held. I try to be an advocate for what I think is best, partly because if someone disagrees with me, I want to know this, because they might be sitting on a piece of information that I'm going to add, and if they are, so I need to make my current best take on everything clearly known, because I want the disagreement, because then I can learn something, which then maybe makes me completely change my mind. And then I'm going to be strongly for that, because again, I want to have people add more information to this. Again, these are consequences of this seemingly simple decision of, are you interested in being right, or are you looking for truth?
When it comes to decision making, Tobi believes that some things are not quantifiable. People with spreadsheets tend to win meetings, and that's because people are drawn to quantifiable things. But some things simply can't be quantified, like taste and intuition. This reminds me of the time I asked Jason Fried, the founder of Basecamp, how he tests copy changes. I was expecting him to say something about A/B testing or analytics, and instead he said, "We don't test, we just do our best and move on." Here's Toby talking about not overvaluing quantitative data.
I always chafe a little bit about spreadsheets lead to fake certainty, and very often the spreadsheet ends up winning the meeting. And I find that there's a lot of ways how that can go very wrong. So I'm encouraging people to next ideally to every column that has an assumption in, put your confidence in. And then instead of having the final number about what's best, I want to see the error margins. So I think that we just have to be comfortable with things like taste, things like intuition, with things like, that's awesome. You do something and say, that's awesome. I don't know how to put that into a spreadsheet, but I can tell you it's going to be reflected in the numbers if a lot of people agree with it. I don't think Shopify can succeed in the long term if you're not comfortable with building things purely for the unquantifiable with some semblance of faith in the second and third order effects being good for the spreadsheets.
Lastly, I want to cover Toby's thoughts on change and how people should adapt. The advent of technologies like robotics and AI are causing people concern for their future. Toby thinks we should focus on how to be valuable instead of identifying with our jobs and our current skill set.
People think they are valuable due to more legitimate sources of external accreditation. I butchered this word. I mean, having
external validation,
like having a degree is that I'm valuable because I have this degree. I'm valuable because I am a front-end developer. And most things are fundamentally incorrect. I mean, maybe in some of these sort of meandering, middling companies, that might be true. You are valuable because of a brain you've got. You're valuable because you make choices. You're valuable because as a front-end designer, not just that you are actually engineering, that you can program, but also that you have an aptitude to work on build systems that are great and easy and to use for people that are resilient to random people do very random stuff with user interfaces, and you build something that it's your experience, it's your skill, it's your actual it's your life story rolled up is your intuition, is your ability to make great decisions quickly. And so often this anxiety that we're talking about popping up the stack to your actual question is that people confuse their own self-worth and their role in the world and their ability to feed their family, frankly, with the continuation of jobs and the continuation of a role that they have. But the question you should have is how can I be valuable? That's Shopify hired you as a person. The only reason why we create roles and recs is because they are lures to great people. The interview process is not a process of figuring, can you do this role? Can we slot you into this role? It is, will Shopify be better for you being here, right? And so people shouldn't have those anxieties. People should figure out how to be valuable and show great flexibility in this. Ideally, develop range, or you should make a fundamental choice of are you going all in on specialization or range? Most people should opt for range. Specialists will everyone who knows that they should be a specialist knows they should. It's everyone should be a specialist knows they should be. This is a very particular set of character traits, which wants to dedicate itself to a very narrow kind of thing and go unbelievably deep, to a degree that's just absolutely impossible to appreciate for the non-specialists. The depth, the true depth of true specialists is incredible. What specialists don't understand is how incredibly good journalists can be at 50 things, right? Like they think like many people think a generalist is sort of like a jack of all trades, master of none. Like this is one of the dumbest sentences I've ever heard. That's like not like, that's just usually someone who hasn't made a choice and is not good at developing any kind of skill sets. Like they're fairly rare people. You're like Pareto principle alone tells you that first 80% of every field can be done 20% of time. So like you can develop easily 5 fields to a degree of 8 out of 10. While the specialist is just looking at primary topic, right? So and frankly, this is even incorrect because learning the next thing is significantly faster than learning previous thing, because the skill set of learning is itself a skill set, and it's actually your skill set of how quickly you are learning which determines how long it takes you to pick up any kind of new field to a certain 8 or 10 out of 10.
To make this point more general, we should seek infinite games. This makes us more open to change.
James Carse's book is really meaningful to me, partly because I love the way he describes what infinite journeys are. He talks about it like you start with some kind of a vision, set out towards some horizon that you find interesting, starting out on curiosity. The goal is not trying to reach the horizon because that would make it a finite game. The goal is actually just make it towards the horizon so that you gain more vision. I find that cycle to be intoxicating. I love thinking about Shopify as a journey because, again, I sold snowboards and I built software in an obscure Japanese programming language, which then captured everyone's imagination and pushed attention to my snowboard store, which felt very unearned, but sort of happened. The other thing that James Carse talks about in his book is that the biggest functional difference between people engaged in playing finite games, something like tennis where you're trying to win based on score, or infinite games, is a relationship to change. If you are playing a finite game, the rules need to be defined ahead of time because there's a winning condition and the game's over when all participants agree it's over because some condition has been met. The infinite game has no such facility. In fact, all change is interesting. Change actually causes the journey to go differently, go more precisely. You welcome it. Frankly, that's also useful psychology right now. And for all of the last 2 years of this decade seems to be really prioritizing rewarding the adaptable. If your reaction to change is fight it and try to revert to what has been before, I think you're in for a really bad time.
Thanks for listening. I hope you found this useful, and I hope you're able to apply some of Tobi's knowledge, even if you're not running a 10,000 person company.